I always thought living by a lake would be peaceful. Mornings would start with the gentle lapping of water against the shore, the occasional splash of a fish, and the chirping of birds high up in the trees. That's exactly what I was enjoying that morning, my fishing rod in hand, a thermos of coffee steaming beside me, and not a soul around for miles. The sun had just begun to hit the water, making it glitter like someone had poured 1,000 tiny diamonds across the surface. I took a sip of coffee, leaned back in my chair and thought, yep, this is exactly why I moved here. Then I heard it, the unmistakable rumble of a large SUV. Not just any SUV, mind you. This one rolled like it owned the road, black, shiny, and almost aggressive in the way it approached my driveway. I squinted toward the sound and caught sight of her. A Karen. The infamous HOA Karen, clipboard in hand, shoes clicking against the pavement like some character out of a bad drama. And behind her, two of her friends, both wearing sunglasses and smirking as if they had a secret I wasn't in on yet. I froze for a moment, coffee halfway to my mouth, unsure whether to greet her politely or start running for cover. The clipboard alone screamed trouble like a warning sign that said, "I'm about to make your life miserable." I knew her reputation, she had been the bane of at least half the neighborhood, and now she was here. Karen stopped at the edge of my property, hands on her hips. "This lake is community property," she yelled, and just like that, the peaceful morning evaporated into chaos. My heart raced. Community property. My property rights were clear as day, and yet here she was, acting like she had the legal authority of a king. I put down my coffee and stood up, trying to project calm. Hi, Karen. Actually, this lake is privately owned. I maintain it, fish it, and well, I live right here." Her eyes narrowed. "I don't care what you call it. This is for the whole community. You can't just keep people out." I almost laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, it was terrifying, but because the sheer audacity of her statement was cartoonish. I mean, here she was, pointing at the water as if the ducks and lilies belonged to her personally. My brain scrambled to process how to handle this without turning the morning into a full-blown HOA warzone. Karen didn't give me the chance to reply. She marched forward like she owned the place, the clipboard swinging dramatically with each step. Her friends trailed behind, whispering, probably egging her on. "You know, this could get ugly," I muttered to myself, though I knew I had to stand my ground. I tried to reason with her. "Karen, seriously, this is my private property. You and your friends can't just..." She cut me off with a scream so loud that it carried across the water. "Community property, everyone has a right to fish here." I swear, the ducks looked at me like, "Oh no, not this woman again." My pulse quickened. I had dealt with petty HOA squabbles before, but this felt different. There was something almost theatrical about her presence, like she had rehearsed this entire scene and I was the unwitting villain. My mind raced through all the possible outcomes. Call the police, escalate with the HOA board, or just try to convince her to leave before things got messy. I decided to stay calm. I squared my shoulders and stepped closer, trying to keep my voice steady. "Karen, I'm going to ask you one more time. This lake is private, I maintain it. You and your guests cannot just wade in and start fishing. Please step back." She stared at me like I had just grown a second head. Then, without warning, she whipped out her phone, pointing it at me as if she were about to broadcast my crime to the entire neighborhood. Her friends giggled. My stomach sank. This was about to get worse before it got better. I took a deep breath. I wasn't about to give in. Not to Karen, not to her drama, not to her shouting about community rights over my own property. I clenched my fists, ready for the standoff that was clearly about to begin. And then, just as I braced myself, one of her friends stepped toward the lake, fishing rod in hand, like they were testing the waters, literally. I realized at that moment that my peaceful morning by the lake was officially over. Karen didn't wait for me to finish. She strutted onto the dock as if she had a crown on her head. Her two friends followed like loyal subjects, each holding a fishing rod with all the confidence of someone who's about to claim treasure that isn't theirs. I took a step forward, raising my hand slightly, not in surrender, but as a polite warning. "Karen," I said, trying to keep my voice calm despite the adrenaline surging through me, "please step back. I've already explained, this is private property. You and your friends cannot just wade in and start fishing." She stopped mid-step, her face contorting as if I'd just insulted her entire existence. "Private property?" she scoffed. "This is community property. Everyone has a right to enjoy it. You can't just block us." I blinked. For a second I thought maybe I'd misheard. Community property? This was MY Lake. I maintain it. I fish it. Heck, I even rescued that duck with the broken wing last month. And here she was, acting like she owned it. I could almost hear the absurdity of it playing in a laugh track in the back of my mind. One of her friends stepped closer, trying to peek into the water, probably hopping to see if the fish were biting. "Yeah, come on," he said. "It's just fishing. What's the big deal?" I clenched my jaw. "The big deal is that it's not yours to decide," I said. "Please, everyone step back, now." Karen ignored me completely. Instead, she waved her hands like she was conducting an orchestra, her shrill voice carrying across the water. "This lake belongs to the community. You cannot just stop people from enjoying it." I sighed. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. Karen had a flair for drama that could rival a Broadway actor. Every word she shouted felt like it was designed to make me question my sanity. And her friends, they were laughing quietly, enjoying the show, clearly waiting for her to escalate things. I decided to try reasoning one more time. "Look, Karen, I get it. You think you're enforcing some rule. But legally, I own this property, and that includes the lake in front of my house. You and your guests cannot enter without permission. It's that simple." She stomped her foot, as if the universe itself should bend to her version of reality. "I don't care about your rules," she yelled. "The community comes first." I felt my patience fraying. "Karen, I'm not trying to argue. I'm telling you the facts. You're welcome to fish at the public lakes down the road, but this one is mine. You can leave peacefully or this gets unpleasant." She paused for a split second, like she was considering her next move, then smirked. That smirk made my stomach turn. "I'm not leaving," she said. "I have rights and my guests have rights. This is my community too." Her friends started inching toward the water. One of them dipped a foot in, testing the boundary like it was a small game. I couldn't help it. I laughed nervously, but it came out as a bark. "I said step back," I shouted, trying to keep control. My heart was hammering in my chest, adrenaline fueling every word. Karen pulled out her phone, waving it in my face. "You're on camera now. The HOA will see this," she declared. "Everyone will know what a tyrant you are." I forced a smile, hiding my frustration. "Great, you film me all you want. I've got my documents, my permits, and the law on my side. You might look ridiculous, but at least I'll still be in the right." Her eyes narrowed. I could tell she wasn't used to losing arguments, or at least not publicly. And yet, she had a trick up her sleeve. I could sense it. Karen was already plotting her next move, her tone dripping with the kind of determination that made my stomach twist. For a moment, I considered calling the local sheriff, just to have someone official on site. But then I realized, I might as well enjoy this. I was standing my ground, and Karen's theatrics were spectacular enough to keep the neighborhood entertained. I glanced over my shoulder and noticed some neighbors peeking from behind their fences, whispering and pointing. And in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. This peaceful morning by the lake was officially over. Karen wasn't just a nuisance. She was a force of nature, and I was about to find out just how far she would go to prove a point that had no basis in reality. I tightened my grip on my fishing rod, ready for the standoff that was about to define the day. I watched as Karen's friends waded a few feet into the water, their fishing lines flopping like they were auditioning for a slapstick comedy. My patience was already thinning, but I knew I had to stay calm. One wrong move and this could turn into a neighborhood spectacle I wasn't prepared for. I planted my feet firmly on the dock and squared my shoulders. "Step out of the water. Now," I said, trying to keep my voice level. Karen spun around, her eyes blazing like a warning flare. "You don't get to tell us what to do. This lake is for the community. I clenched my jaw. Karen, you are wrong. I am the property owner. I maintain this lake. You cannot fish here without my permission. Her guests laughed nervously, unsure whether to back off or side with her. One of them tugged at his rod, almost as if testing me, like some villain in a movie scene daring the hero to act. My heart raced. I could feel every neighbor's gaze on me from behind their fences. This wasn't just about fishing anymore, it had turned into a public showdown. Karen leaned in closer, and her voice dropped just enough to sound sinister. Do you really think you can scare me? I have the HOA on my side. You can't just... I held up my hand to stop her mid-rant. Karen, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm telling you the facts. You have no authority here, and I have every legal right to stop you from stepping into my water. She paused, and for a moment I thought maybe logic might penetrate. But then she pulled out her phone again and began recording. This is evidence. Everyone will see what a tyrant you are, she screamed, waving the phone around like a sword. I could feel my pulse quicken, but I forced myself to take a deep breath. If I showed fear, she'd escalate further. I squared my stance and met her glare head-on. Film all you want. I've got my documents. I have permits. You'll see that your claims mean nothing in the face of actual property law. Karen's face twisted into a mix of anger and disbelief. She muttered something under her breath, probably insulting me in a way that only she understood. Her guests, still in the shallow water, exchanged uneasy glances. I could tell they were starting to realize this wasn't going to be the leisurely fishing trip Karen had promised. Why are you being so difficult? Karen demanded, her voice rising again. This is supposed to be for everyone, community property. I shook my head. No, Karen, this is MY Lake. I pay for it, I maintain it, I own it. You cannot just wade in whenever you feel like it. I'm giving you a chance to leave peacefully before this becomes messy. Her eyes narrowed, and I noticed a flicker of hesitation, tiny, almost imperceptible, but it was there. I realized I might have her on the ropes, but I also knew better than to underestimate her. Karen thrived on confrontation. You think a piece of paper matters more than the people, she shouted, stepping dangerously close to the water's edge. I could feel her energy, that wild, chaotic force that made her a neighborhood legend. I didn't back up. I didn't flinch. I had to stand my ground. Her friends began whispering among themselves. I could see the confusion on their faces. They weren't sure who was in charge, the woman yelling about community property or the calm homeowner who refused to back down. I caught a neighbor peeking from behind a tree, mouth open in disbelief. And then it happened. Karen took a step forward, pointing dramatically at the water like she was about to take some kind of heroic action. Her phone was still raised, recording, her voice echoing across the lake. I will not be ignored. I tightened my grip on my fishing rod. This was it, the moment where I had to make it clear I would not let her or her guests trespass. My mind raced, weighing my options. Call the sheriff? Maybe. Confront her directly, already doing that. Walk away and let her take over, never. Karen, I said, keeping my voice calm but firm, you have one chance. Step out of my lake, leave my property, now. For a tense second, the world seemed to hold its breath. The ducks stopped quacking. The water reflected the sky like glass. Even Karen's friends seemed frozen, unsure if this would explode into chaos. Then she smirked, or at least tried to. This isn't over, she said, before muttering something about calling the HOA board. Her guests looked disappointed, but they finally began stepping back, fishing rods dripping. I exhaled, but only slightly. I knew better than to celebrate too early. Karen never gave up that easily. The quiet morning I had imagined was gone, replaced by the lingering tension of a standoff that was far from over. And I had a sinking feeling this was just the beginning. By mid-morning, it was clear the lakefront standoff wasn't going to end quietly. Karen had fully transformed into a one-woman drama machine, packing back and forth on the dock like she was starring in her own reality TV show. Her two guests lingered awkwardly, fishing lines dangling in the water, but eyes glued to me, unsure if they were supposed to intervene or stay out of trouble. I leaned against the railing, trying to keep my cool. "Karen, calm down. This doesn't have to be dramatic," I said. My voice was steady, though my heart pounded in my chest like a drum. She spun toward me, eyes blazing. "Dramatic? You call me dramatic," she shouted. "You're the one keeping the community from enjoying its property. You're selfish, controlling, and tyrannical." I blinked. For a moment, I wasn't sure if I should laugh or cry. Her insults were so over the top that they had a cartoonish quality. But beneath the humor, I felt a real tension. This wasn't just about a lake anymore, it had become a battle of wills. And I wasn't about to lose. "Karen," I said calmly, taking a step closer, "I'm not trying to keep anyone from enjoying anything. I'm just asking you to respect the law. This lake is private, I maintain it. You and your guests cannot fish here without my permission, that's all." She threw her arms into the air. The law doesn't matter, community property, everyone has a right, this is a shared space." I noticed her voice had risen enough to carry across the street. I could hear a few neighbors stepping outside, peeking from behind fences and blinds. Their quiet murmurs added to the tension, like an audience holding its breath in the middle of a high-stakes scene. One of her guests waded a little further into the water, testing the boundary. "Come on, it's just a little fishing," he muttered. I shot him a look that could stop anyone mid-step. "You are on private property. Step back immediately." Karen whipped around, waving her phone again. "I'm recording this. Everyone will see what a tyrant you are." I sighed. "Record all you want. I have my documents, my permits, and the law on my side. You'll look ridiculous, and I'll still be in the right." She gaped at me as if my calmness were a personal affront. "Ridiculous," she spat. "You don't understand, I have influence. People listen to me." I couldn't help but smirk slightly. Influence? Over a lake that wasn't hers. She really had no idea how ridiculous she sounded. But I kept it subtle. I didn't want to provoke her into doing something completely unhinged. Karen's pace quickened. She shouted something about fines, HOA rules, and even bringing in the sheriff. I braced myself. I had seen HOA Karen escalate before, but this felt more intense. The energy she radiated was chaotic, almost magnetic, drawing everyone's attention. Even the ducks seemed to float a little higher, like they sensed the drama. I took a deep breath. "Karen, listen. You can call whoever you want. I will show them my documents. I own this property. You cannot force me to allow access to your friends. Please, for everyone's sake, leave peacefully." Her eyes narrowed, and for a split second I saw a flicker of doubt, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "No, I will not leave. This lake belongs to the community. You can't make me." Her voice carried like a warning siren, and I felt a mixture of amusement and tension. This was insane, but I was determined to hold my ground. And then the unexpected happened. One of the neighbors, a quiet man who rarely spoke, stepped forward from behind the fence. "Karen, maybe you should calm down," he said softly, holding up his hands. "I think the homeowner is right. The permits and records show this is private property." Karen turned, her face momentarily flushing with frustration. She muttered under her breath, something that sounded suspiciously like unbelievable, and spun back toward me. I saw my chance. "Karen, the sooner you leave, the better for everyone. Please get your guests and go. No one needs to get embarrassed today." Her guests finally began stepping back, reluctantly removing their feet from the water. Karen, however, was not ready to surrender. She opened her mouth to yell again, but I could see it, the first crack in her performance. For the first time, doubt flickered across her face. I didn't relax, not entirely. I knew HOA Karen. She was persistent, theatrical, and relentless. But for now, she had been stopped. The dock was quiet again, save for the soft ripple of the water and the occasional chirp of birds. And in that brief moment of calm, I realized something important. The showdown wasn't over. Karen wasn't going anywhere quietly, and the next move she made could change everything. I thought the standoff at the lake might be winding down after that tense showdown, But I should have known better. Karen never backed down quietly. Not for a second. By mid-afternoon, the peace I had fought so hard to reclaim was shattered again. Karen had retreated to her black SUV, muttering furiously to herself and her guests, probably calling the HOA board. I watched her through the corner of my eye, gripping my fishing rod like it was both a shield and a weapon. I wasn't about to let her intimidate me, or worse, drag me into some unnecessary legal mess. Sure enough, 20 minutes later she emerged, phone glued to her ear and her expression a mix of fury and desperation. I could hear snippets of her conversation even from a distance. He's refusing, private lake. I need the HOA involved. Yes, board meeting today. Great, she was calling for backup. I leaned against the dock, taking a deep breath and muttered, here we go again. Her friends waded into the shallows again, trying to fish casually, but it was obvious they were just waiting for her signal. Karen stomped onto the dock, phone still in hand. I've got the board coming down here. You can't stop this. You'll be fined. You'll regret this. I squared my shoulders. Calm, firm, focused. Karen, I said, trying to inject as much authority into my voice as she was trying to wield with hers, you can bring anyone you want. It won't change the fact that I own this lake. You and your guests cannot fish here. That's the law. Step back now. Her lips tightened, but I noticed a tiny flicker of hesitation. Maybe she realized that I wasn't bluffing. Maybe she realized that her theatrics weren't enough this time. Still, she wasn't about to give up. I decided to take a small victory while I could. I reached for my folder of ownership papers and permits, waving them casually but clearly. These documents show everything, this lake, this dock, even the property line markers. Everything is mine. The HOA board will see the truth, Karen. You can call them all you want. Her jaw twitched. Those papers don't mean anything. The community has rights. You can't just... I cut her off, pointing gently to the papers. The law matters, Karen, not your imagination. I maintain this lake, I pay for its upkeep, and it's clearly defined as private property. End of story. Her guests, who had been teetering between amusement and fear, exchanged glances. One of them muttered, maybe we should just go. Karen shot him a glare that could have melted steel. Stay, we're making a stand. I shook my head, silently marveling at her determination. I could almost see the wheels turning in her head. She was thinking about how to manipulate the board, how to pressure neighbors, how to make me look like the villain. It was impressive in a terrifying, chaotic way, but ultimately it was pointless. Still, I could feel the tension in the air, heavy enough to cut with a knife. I knew she was going to escalate further, maybe even try to involve the police. My stomach twisted at the thought, but I reminded myself to stay calm. Panic would only give her an advantage. Karen, I said firmly, lowering my voice just enough to make it deadly serious. I suggest you and your guests leave. I'm giving you a chance to walk away peacefully before this gets any more complicated. Her lips curled into a smirk, though her eyes were sharp and calculating. Oh, I'm not leaving, she said. The HOA will take care of this. You'll see, you can't stop me. I exhaled slowly, trying to center myself. I knew my next move had to be careful. Karen was unpredictable, stubborn, and frankly, ridiculous, but she wasn't stupid. I needed to make sure I was ready for whatever she tried next. I glanced at the neighbors watching from behind fences and windows. Some of them were whispering to each other, clearly entertained. Others were wide-eyed, unsure of what might happen. The quiet calm of the lake was gone, replaced by an electric tension that made the air feel heavy. And then it hit me. I had something Karen didn't know about, something that could turn this whole situation in my favor. I had all the proper ownership documents, permits, and legal proof that this lake was private property. Karen might try to scare me, threaten me, and yell, but she had no leverage. No real power. I smiled to myself, silently savoring the thought. The next time she tried to pull her stunt, I would be ready. And when the HOA board arrived, Karen would realize that all her shouting, her threats, and her so-called authority meant nothing. For now, though, I had to endure her theatrics. The sun was high, the lake water glimmered, and Karen was packing like a storm about to break. I gripped my fishing rod and prepared myself for the next move in this absurd, high-stakes HOA drama. I knew it was coming. Karen wasn't content with just yelling at me by the lake. She had to drag in the big guns. By mid-afternoon, I could hear the familiar hum of cars approaching, and sure enough, a few minutes later, the HOA board members arrived, all looking serious and slightly out of place on my property. They were carrying clipboards, folders, and expressions that clearly said, "We don't want to be here, but duty calls." Karen was practically vibrating with excitement. "I've brought the board," she announced triumphantly, waving her phone like a baton. "Finally, they'll see I was right all along." I met her gaze calmly. "Glad you could make it, Karen," I said. My tone was polite, but there was an undercurrent of steel. I wasn't about to let this become some kind of spectacle that went in her favor. The board members stepped onto the dock, surveying the scene. One of them, a woman in a blue blouse, raised an eyebrow. "Can someone explain what's going on here?" Karen jumped in immediately. "This homeowner is refusing to let the community enjoy the lake. I've tried reasoning with him, but he's completely selfish and controlling. This is a shared resource, and he's keeping everyone out." I took a deep breath. "With all due respect," I said, holding up my folder of ownership papers and permits, "this lake is private property. I maintain it and legally I own it. These documents prove it. I'm not preventing the community from anything, they just cannot fish here without my permission." There was a pause as the board members examined the documents. I noticed Karen's confident smile falter slightly. One of them, a man in a gray suit, adjusted his glasses and squinted at the papers. "These appear to be in order. You have permits and ownership records." "Yes," I replied. "Everything is current and legally recognized. I have every right to control who accesses this lake." Karen opened her mouth to argue, but one of the board members raised a hand. "Please, Karen, let him finish." Her smile flickered, then vanished. I could see her fury simmering beneath the surface, her dramatic performance beginning to crumble. She muttered something under her breath, probably cursing the fact that she had underestimated me. Another board member stepped forward. "Do you have any records of prior community agreements regarding this lake?" I nodded and handed over a few pages. "Here, previous agreements and permits clearly designate this as private property. The community has no legal claim." Karen's eyes widened as she skimmed the documents. That can't be right. I'm telling you, he's blocking us unfairly." One of the board members raised an eyebrow. "The law is the law, Karen. Personal opinions don't override legal ownership. If you wish to dispute this, you may need to pursue it through proper legal channels. But on this property, the homeowner is within his rights." I fought the urge to smirk. The tension in the air was electric. Karen's dramatic persona, so commanding and loud for so long, was finally colliding with reality, and reality was winning. Her guests, who had lingered nervously nearby, started stepping back. One whispered to the other, clearly relieved that they weren't about to be thrown into a legal mess. Karen tried one last appeal, her voice rising again. "But it's community property. We all deserve access." The board members exchanged glances, clearly unimpressed. One of them said softly but firmly, "Karen, as tempting as it might be to bend the rules, this is a private lake. The homeowner is correct." Her face turned red. I could almost hear the gears grinding in her mind, trying to find some loophole, some angle, anything to maintain her sense of control. But it was no use. The evidence was overwhelming, and I had remained calm throughout the entire ordeal. I glanced out at the lake, breathing a little easier. The sun glinted off the water, peaceful once more, and the tension that had gripped me all morning slowly began to ease. I knew Karen might never truly accept this loss, but for now, the lake and my rights were safe. And as the board quietly packed up their folders and prepared to leave, I realized something important. Karen's theatrics could not override the truth. She could shout, threaten, and even try to manipulate the neighbors. but reality, backed by legal proof, had won the day. I watched Karen storm off toward her SUV, muttering about the next time, and I felt a mixture of relief and amusement. For the first time all day, the lake was mine again. The quiet lapping of water and the gentle rustle of leaves felt like a reward for standing my ground. But I knew better than to celebrate too loudly. HOA Karen was nothing if not persistent. This might be a victory, but it was only one battle in what could very well be a long and dramatic war. I thought the tension had eased after the HOA board confirmed my ownership of the lake, but I knew better than to underestimate Karen. She was like a storm that refused to dissipate, even when logic and law were stacked against her. After the board left, I half expected her to retreat quietly, but of course, she had other plans. Within an hour, Karen returned with even more gusto than before. This time, she brought a tiny entourage, neighbors she had apparently rallied to support the community cause. They shuffled behind her, looking unsure, like extras in her ongoing drama. "I told you," Karen yelled, waving her phone like a banner. "The community has rights. You can't just steal the lake from us." I tried to stay calm, though a grin tugged at the corner of my mouth. I had all the proof I needed, and now I realized I had a little extra advantage too. Over the past few days, I had quietly documented every interaction, every claim Karen made, every wild exaggeration. I had screenshots, photos, and even video recordings. If she tried to twist the story, I was ready. "Karen," I said, pointing toward my neatly stacked paperwork on the dock, "everything you're claiming is already documented. And if you try to push this further, the evidence is ready for review. The HOA already ruled in my favor." Her face contorted like I'd just insulted her very soul. You can't do this. Everyone knows this lake belongs to the neighborhood. You're selfish." I leaned casually on my fishing rod. "Actually, Karen, the neighborhood has rights, just not here. You can fish at the public lakes nearby or join a community pond. But this lake, it's private. And now your theatrics are being recorded." Her guests shuffled nervously, looking at their phones, realizing that Karen's dramatic plans weren't going as expected. One muttered, "Maybe we should just go." Karen spun on them like a whirlwind. "No, stay, we're fighting for what's ours." I couldn't help but smirk. "This is what I was afraid of," I muttered under my breath. "Her ego is bigger than her understanding of the law." Then came the moment that turned the entire scene. One of her so-called supporting neighbors, a man who had been quietly observing the standoff, stepped forward and pointed to the lake's posted signage. "Private property, no trespassing." Karen froze. Her eyes darted to the sign, then back at the man, then at me. Her confident smirk faltered, replaced by a flash of panic. She opened her mouth to argue, but the board's ruling and my documentation loomed large, leaving her words powerless. Her entourage exchanged embarrassed glances. They had expected drama, perhaps a thrilling victory for Karen, but instead, they were witnessing a spectacular implosion. This doesn't make sense," Karen sputtered. Her voice shook, high-pitched with disbelief. You can't, how?" I smiled faintly, leaning back against the dock. "Karen, the law is the law. Ownership is ownership. You can scream, wave your phone, and rally neighbors all you want, but none of it changes the facts." Her shoulders slumped slightly. I could see the fight leaving her, replaced by the faintest hint of humiliation. Her entourage started quietly leaving, mumbling apologies, while Karen herself glared at me, muttering under her breath. I finally allowed myself a small laugh, quiet but triumphant. The lake was peaceful again, the tension slowly melting away. Karen had thrown everything at me, yelling, threats, phone recordings, and her entourage, but none of it mattered. Logic, law, and proper documentation had won. As she stormed toward her SUV, muttering about next time and this isn't over, I realized something. For all her theatrics, Karen had no real power here. Her attempts to control the community, to intimidate me, had backfired spectacularly. I sat back on the dock, finally casting my line into the shimmering water. The fish didn't care about HOA rules, board meetings, or Karen's meltdown. The sun sparkled on the lake, and for the first time all day, I could relax. I had defended my property, maintained my calm, and turned a potential disaster into a satisfying victory. And as I reeled in my line, smiling at the ripples on the water, I couldn't help but think, HOA Karen might come back, but for today, the lake and my sanity were mine. By late afternoon, the lake finally felt like mine again. The chaos that Karen had brought, the yelling, the threats, the endless phone calls to the HOA, had faded into the background, leaving only the gentle ripple of water and the occasional splash of a fish. I sank into my chair on the dock, coffee in hand, and let out a long sigh. For the first time all day, I could breathe. The neighbors who had been peeking from behind their fences earlier had returned to their homes, leaving me alone with the calm beauty of my lake. It was almost surreal. Just a few hours ago, Karen had stormed onto my property like a tornado of drama, and now peace. The contrast was almost humorous. I chuckled quietly to myself. I can't believe that just happened, I muttered, shaking my head. HOA Karen, community rights, and a private lake all in one morning. My phone buzzed a message from one of my neighbors. Heard Karen got embarrassed. LOL, glad you stood your ground. I grinned. It felt good to have a little moral victory shared, even quietly, among people who understood what had happened. As I cast my line into the water, I reflected on the events. Karen had tried everything: shouting, intimidation, recording videos, calling the HOA, even rallying support from other neighbors. And yet, in the end, it had all crumbled. Not because I was aggressive or confrontational, but because I stayed calm, had my facts straight, and stood firm. It struck me as funny in a bittersweet way, how one person could turn such a peaceful morning into a theatrical showdown. But it also reminded me that persistence and logic, combined with a little patience, could win even against the most dramatic opponents. Of course, Karen wouldn't give up that easily. I knew that. She thrived on chaos, and one loss wouldn't stop her from trying again. I could already imagine the next round: more phone calls, more community meetings, perhaps even another public spectacle. But for now, I had my lake, my peace, and my sanity intact. I let my rod rest on the dock and leaned back, enjoying the sunlight glinting off the water. The ducks floated lazily near the shore, completely oblivious to HOA politics, and the gentle rustle of the trees reminded me why I had moved here in the first place. Suddenly, a small ripple caught my eye. A fish leapt out of the water, sending a splash across the surface. I laughed aloud, a pure, satisfied laugh that had nothing to do with HOA rules or Karen's dramatic antics. In that moment, everything felt exactly right. I poured another cup of coffee, savoring the quiet. I thought about how absurdly over the top the day had been. The shouting, the phone recordings, the board visit, and Karen's eventual defeat. It was almost cinematic. If someone had filmed it, it would have been pure gold for a reality show. But reality, unlike TV, had a satisfying ending. The lake was safe, the rules had been followed. And Karen, well, she had been reminded that theatrics don't trump facts. I couldn't help but smile at the thought. Maybe she'd come back tomorrow. Maybe she'd try a new strategy. Maybe she'd try to rally the neighborhood again. But I was ready. Calm, prepared, and fully armed with facts and legal proof, I knew I could handle whatever she threw my way. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden streaks across the lake, I leaned back, sipping my coffee and watching the water shimmer. For today, at least, the lake was mine. The drama had passed, and the quiet I had sought for years had finally returned. I let the tension of the morning slip away. The birds chirped, the water lapped gently against the dock, and somewhere in the distance, I imagined Karen, frustrated and fuming in her SUV, plotting her next move. I smiled, let her try. Because no matter what, this lake, and my morning peace, was mine to protect. And for now, that was more than enough. Every HOA has a story on HOA Headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.